Hello everyone and welcome back. In this lecture we'll continue our discussion on bokeh plots. In the previous lecture we saw how we could draw scatter plots by using circle markers. Now let's see an example of how we can draw scatter plots by using some other markers. Let's look at the square marker. Okay, let's do that. So the first thing we need to do is define our figure. So for that we'll be calling the figure method, and then as last time we'll save it in a variable called p. So we'll call the figure method and then pass the plot width and plot height attributes. So for plot width we'll set it to be equal to 450, and you can adjust this depending on your notebook. Let's pass plot height. We'll set it to be equal to 350. And the next thing we'll do is call the square method on our figure P. So we have our figure P and then call the square method so that we get squares for our scatter plots. And then we'll pass our X and Y points. I'll pass the same points that I used for the previous lecture. So for our X points it will be 2468, and then for our Y 4371. So the first scatter plot will be at X position 2, Y position 4, and so on. Okay, we have those, and then we can pass a size of 16 for our scatter plots, and we also, so that we can pass the color attribute last time. For color let's use red, and once we have that we can call the show method and pass our P, run it, and now we have 4 scatter plots with square markers. Okay, size is 16, color is red, and we can pass any other attributes that we like. Okay, to control the transparency of your marker you can pass the alpha attribute and then set it to whatever transparency that you want. For instance, let's set it to 0.3. okay, you can do that. And another thing you can do is control the size of each of your markers. How can we do that? We can do that by passing size as a list of values. Okay, let's see an example. So what I can do is, instead of 16 for each of our square markers, we can pass a list of various size values. For instance, let's say we want the first marker to have a size of 6. The second marker, it can have a size of, let's say, 10. For our third marker, let's say it will have a size of 14, and then for our last marker, let's make it 18. Okay, so we can do that. Now if we run this, it's still showing the same size. Okay, what we can do is, let's create another figure object and store it in a variable called X. So it said X is equal to figure, and then pass plot width 450, and then plot height, let's set it to be 350, and then here we'll call x.square and then show X. Run it again. So here you see different sizes for our markers. The first one is size 6. For our second marker it's of size 10, and then 14, and finally we have 18. So color is red and alpha transparency is 0.3. you see, so the transparency is different depending on what value you pass for alpha. And we mentioned that we have various markers for our plotting, and some of those markers are So far we have seen circle and square. So we have circle, we have square. There are other markers like diamond, cross, circle cross, square cross, triangle, asterisk, and so on. You can read more about those on the documentation. Let's see one more example, one last example. What we'll do is we'll use a few of these markers and use them to plot in the same figure. Okay, that's the example that we'll use. For instance, the question is use the diamond, circle, and square markers in the same figure. Okay, so that's the question. How can we do that? Let's see how we can do that. First, we'll start by defining our figure, and let's save this. We'll save it in a variable called a. We'll set it to be equal to figure, and then pass your plot width and height attributes. Plot width, let's set it to be 450, and then for plot height, we set it to be equal to 350. And next we'll call, so we'll have to call all these different markers, right? Let's start by calling the diamond marker. So all we have to do is simply call the diamond method on your figure object. Okay, so a dot diamond, and then pass your x and y values. So for x and y values, pass any values that we want. Let's say 2, 4, 6, 9, and then for our y values, let's pass 3, 1, 5, and 3. Okay, so a dot diamond, and then you can pass attributes like size. Let's pass a size of 14, and then for color, let's set it to be equal to green. Maybe we can adjust this later on. So that's one marker, and then let's pass the second marker. So I'll copy this to save some time, and then paste it here. So our second marker is what? Circle. Let's pass the circle marker, and then I'll change the points here. Let's use 3 and 8, and change the first two values. Let's put 8 and 4, and here let's use 5. Okay, so that's our second marker, which is circle, and let's use the color red. And for our third marker, we'll use square. Okay, square, and then change the values here. Let's put 6 and 3 here, and then I'm going to use 2. Okay, so let's change the size to 16, and let me make this 12. For our square, we can change the color to blue, and we can pass different alpha values for transparency for each of our markers. Let's pass an alpha value of 0.3 here. Here we can pass an alpha value of 0.5. And for our last marker, let's pass an alpha value of 0.8. Okay, and once we have our markers, the next thing we can do is call the show method and then pass a. Let's run it and see now. Okay, you have your square markers, your circle markers, and the diamond markers are a little bit out, so we can change the values. Where is our diamond? So our diamond values overlap with the other markers. You see here, there's one diamond here, another one inside our square. So we'll change the values for our diamond. Okay, let me completely change this. I'll pass 1, 5, 7 into. Let's run it again. I still have one of the diamond markers inside our square marker, so let me change this to 6 and run it again. Okay, much better. Now we can see all of the points, right? You see here for transparency, the blue one is much darker, so it has a higher alpha value. So if you go here, you see our square markers have an alpha value of 0.8, so it's darker. And the values, when the values are closer to 0, it's lighter. As you can see here, the green ones are the lightest, whereas the red ones are in the middle. And here you have your sizes, and you can also pass the attributes like fill color. We have seen fill color. For instance, let's pass the fill color attribute here, fill color, and set it to yellow, for instance. Run it again. So you can pass one or more of the attributes. Okay, so here for instance, for the circle markers, we have filled the color with yellow, whereas the color is red, right? That's the border. Otherwise, the default value will be the blue color. Okay, and that's how you can plot more than one marker in your figure. Okay, so just to recap, you define your figure first, and then call the various methods for your markers that you want, and then pass one or more of the attributes. And again, you can play around with this icons here. Okay, so that's what I have for this lecture, and in the next lecture we look at how we can draw line plots. Thank you everyone.